Welcome to Conservation Nation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. In this series, we travel the country to highlight conservation in action. We're in Delaware, home of President Biden, for this episode. The first state, like the Biden administration, wants to reach net zero emissions by 2050 with solar power. But residents aren't fully on board with this agenda. Tune in as we shed light on the situation here. Delaware is known as the first state after it became the first of 13 colonies to be ratified by the U.S. Constitution. The state might be recognized for its famous residence at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but is more renowned for its sandy beaches and scrapple. Scrapple is made of leftover pig parts, cornmeal, and flour. While Delaware didn't invent it, today this quirky food is associated with it. I tried a unique spin on the dish in Rehoboth Beach. It's actually really good. Well done, Delaware. Really? Mm-hmm. Solar energy, like wind, has been touted as a clean energy source to meet America's growing electricity needs. But solar has many downsides. Per the Department of Energy, solar has the lowest capacity factor rate of all energy sources, being reliable for just 24.9% of the year. Not to mention, it's land intensive. In 2 of Delaware's 3 counties, locals are fighting to stop the spread of dozens of proposed solar farms. I spoke with several concerned Delawareans, from farmers to elected officials, to understand the situation better.
Well, those people I talked to are very concerned about the lack of reliability. And the mandates from the government that are subsidized are not real. They don't create a real market assessment of the value of these alternate sources of energy that we know are unreliable.
Our farm runs on one side of the road. The solar array proposed is on the other side of the road. They want to cover the whole farm across the street, several hundred acres of solar panels. Going to devalue the property a lot. The land's just cheap, and some greedy somebody, don't know what, is going to want to cash in on that. And sure enough, this is what we're looking at. You are going to be stuck with the liability. They don't tell you this, but these companies, they go bankrupt and they take all the money and they're going to cut roads all through your farm.
My concerns are that it's taking up valuable land. I got involved because there's just too much going on. It's not being thought of. It's just being where I can go and buy or rent or lease the land to put these projects on that the government is funding. They just go out and they approach people and they throw them all this money, what they can make, but they forget they can't make the money until that system is installed and hooked up to the grid. If it doesn't get hooked up to the grid, you're not going to make any money.
The amount of interest in purchase and leasing that these solar developers have done, I feel like that is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the available land that we have for agriculture. And that's one of our big fears, is that they will gobble up enough that there is not enough land to sustain an industry in our state. Or I'm a 5th generation farmer from Delaware, and I think we're probably getting to the end of that, and this solar thing is going to push us out of here, I think, eventually. It would destroy your bottom line if you tried to compete against it.
I am being offered incredible amounts of money to have a solar farm. If I were to accept that, there's no way in the world I would ever make even a tiny fraction of that by growing crops. The last one said, we want to rent your land and we will pay you $3,000 per acre per year to do that. The problem is, where does this money come from? They are a subsidized business. They don't actually make a profit. The money that they are getting comes from the ratepayers. The only way it can work is if they force us to buy it.
Well, solar's not green because it takes away food. It takes away the production of food. It takes away grazing land. There's no way that it can compete with the energy level of what land produces on the food level. Just it doesn't.
Despite Delaware's aggressive solar push, only 172 megawatts of solar power has been installed, just a mere 4% of the state's electricity generation. The University of Delaware warned, quote, solar farms take up space, and in a small state such as Delaware, it can compete with tillable agricultural land. The panels may be aesthetically displeasing for some, and there is also the possibility of irregular availability of sunlight. depending on whether or how long the sun is up, end quote. The ugly truth is solar panels contain rare earth elements, including cobalt, nickel, cadmium, and lithium, that are sourced in environmentally unfriendly ways. Our interviewees also discussed how the state's net zero policies risk harming Delaware's natural beauty.
Now, instead of a productive agricultural field, you have a solar farm that is pretty hideous to look at, even covered with trees around the outside. It just certainly destroys the beauty of the area.
It's a perverse incentive. If they continue doing this, many people will obviously take advantage of this. We could easily end up in a situation with thousands of acres of solar farms, very, very few crops grown. And I just cannot believe that all these heat islands, but instead of something that benefits the environment by absorbing carbon dioxide, we now have these massive fields of reflectors reflecting sunlight somewhere. It just doesn't seem very environmentally friendly to me. Green energy, the way we're doing it with such heavy subsidies, is just a new form of taxation.
The studies have shown that because solar is unreliable, you end up with shortfalls in terms of your electric power, and so you have brownouts and blackouts.
This whole thing is nothing but a masquerade of getting everybody riled up for 0.04% CO2. Really? Even if we changed everything in the United States, we wouldn't reduce it but by maybe less than half of that. And if we reduce it anymore, guess what won't grow? Crops, trees. We can't go any lower. So it's a life-affirming gas. You got to have it.
We are rounding out our time in Delaware at Bombay Hook National Wildlife Refuge. It's one of 571 sites comprising America's National Wildlife Refuge system. This place carries importance as one of the Mid-Atlantic's last expanses of tidal salt marsh. It's also an optimal location for public land hunters and avid bird watchers. So, all right, follow me. It's a nice, egret.
Americans, even in Delaware, worry about unfettered growth of solar farms. Despite opposition to these projects, lawmakers fail to consider the trade-offs. Will the first state recognize solar shortcomings and do a course correction? That's our hope. Thanks for watching Conservation Nation. If you enjoyed this episode, share it far and wide. Stay tuned for the next episode coming soon.